The soldiers gathered in tense silence. The war was over, but the wounds, both physical and emotional, were still fresh. Carthage had fought hard in the First Punic War, spending lives, resources, and time. Yet, despite the effort, the outcome had been bitter: defeat. Now the mercenaries who had risked everything for the Carthaginian cause stood in anticipation, expecting compensation for their service. What they received instead was devastating. No payment, no reward, just broken promises and silence from the Carthaginian elite. The city, financially devastated by war reparations to Rome, could no longer meet its commitments. Debt had piled up to the point where even basic necessities were scarce. Under the weight of this economic collapse, the government made the harsh decision to withhold payment from the very men who had fought and bled on its behalf. These weren't citizens, they were hired warriors, professional soldiers who had no loyalty to Carthage beyond the coin they had been promised. And now that promise had been shattered. The response was immediate and violent. What began as frustration quickly turned into open rebellion. Soldados cartagineses e Hannibal Barca. This internal uprising became known as the Mercenary War, or, more grimly, the Libyan War. Carthage, already weakened, now faced the terrifying prospect of civil war against a battle-hardened enemy from within. Desperate to suppress the rebellion, Carthage scrambled to raise new forces. Among the commanders called to respond was Hannibal Barca, a veteran of the Punic War, a man known for his tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve. He had little interest in politics or negotiation. He was a soldier through and through. With swift and ruthless precision, Hamilcar led his troops against the mercenaries. He executed a brutal campaign that spared no one. The rebellion was crushed not through diplomacy, but with overwhelming force. But victory came at a cost. Carthage's reputation was shattered, its economy in ruins, and its political system fractured. Across the sea, Rome watched with satisfaction. Their rival, defeated in battle and now imploding internally, seemed to pose no threat for the foreseeable future. But Rome's opportunism knew no bounds. When Sardinian rebels appealed for Roman intervention during the chaos, Rome answered not with aid, but with invasion. Under the pretense of humanitarian concern, they seized both Sardinia and Corsica, territories still legally under Carthaginian control. When Carthage objected, Rome responded with arrogance and demands for further compensation. This blatant aggression inflamed tensions even more. The humiliation was total. Carthage, once a dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, now found itself a shadow of its former glory, disrespected by Rome and weakened from within. Something had to change. It was then that Hannibal Barca stepped forward with a vision. If Carthage was to rise again, it would need new resources, new influence, and a new strategy. The solution, in his eyes, lay not in confrontation with Rome, at least not yet, but in expansion elsewhere. Hamilcar's eyes turned westward to the Iberian Peninsula, a land rich in minerals, fertile land, and untapped trade routes. Conquest there would not only fund Carthage's recovery, it would prepare the nation for a future reckoning. With the reluctant approval of the Carthaginian Senate, Hamilcar set sail for Hispania, bringing with him a small but elite force. Alongside him was a young boy, his son, Hannibal, only 9 years old. This was no casual decision. Hamilcar intended to raise Hannibal not only as a soldier, but as a symbol of what Carthage could become: disciplined, strategic, and unrelenting. In Hispania, Hamilcar executed a campaign of expansion that combined military conquest with political shrewdness. He forged alliances with local tribes, seized control of silver mines, and established fortified settlements. One of these would grow into the new Carthage, a city designed to reflect the rebirth of the Carthaginian spirit. Wealth flowed back to the homeland, allowing debts to be paid and the fleet to be rebuilt. Slowly, Carthage began to rise again, not in North Africa, but on the European continent. Hamilcar's strategy was clear: build an independent power base far from the Senate's interference. He wanted to train an army loyal not to Carthage's politicians, but to the Barca family. And as Hannibal grew, so did his knowledge of terrain, tactics, and warfare. His education came not from books, but from campaigns. Hamilcar taught him to understand his enemies, to anticipate their moves, and most importantly, to never forgive Rome. Carthaginian politics, however, remained as turbulent as ever. While Hamilcar conquered territory, enemies at home whispered of his ambition. Men like Hanno, leader of the conservative faction in Carthage, feared the rise of a general whose influence rivaled that of the Senate itself. But Hamilcar's success made him untouchable. As long as silver flowed and enemies fell, the Senate had no choice but to let him continue. Then came the unexpected. Hamilcar was killed in a remote campaign deep in the Iberian interior. His death left a vacuum that was swiftly filled by his son-in-law, Hasdrubal the Fair. Unlike Hamilcar, Hasdrubal focused more on diplomacy than war. He expanded Carthage's influence through negotiation and statecraft, signing treaties and founding Nova Carthago as the capital of their Iberian territories. But the shadow of Rome never disappeared. Concerned by Carthaginian growth, Rome demanded a treaty. Carthage could not cross the Ebro River in northern Spain. The region south of the river would remain under Carthaginian influence, but the north was off-limits. Hasdrubal agreed for now. The arrangement kept the peace, but the tension simmered beneath the surface. Peace, however, would not last. Hasdrubal was assassinated by a Celtic slave, throwing the Iberian command structure into disarray. But leadership quickly coalesced around one man, Hannibal. Now in his mid-20s, Hannibal had been raised for this moment. Trained in war, hardened by loss and driven by purpose, he was elected commander-in-chief by both the army and local Iberian allies. With Hamilcar's blood and legacy behind him, Hannibal was ready. His first move would change history. In the city of Saguntum, located just south of the Ebro, a crisis erupted. Though technically within Carthage's sphere, Saguntum had allied itself with Rome. For Hannibal, this was intolerable. He laid siege to the city, ignoring Roman protests and invoking Carthage's right to act within its own territory. After months of resistance, Saguntum fell. The message was clear. Carthage would no longer be contained. Rome was outraged. They demanded Carthage hand over Hannibal. The Senate, divided and fearful, refused. War was declared, but Hannibal had already begun the unthinkable. Rather than wait for Rome to attack Hispania or Africa, he would bring the war to their doorstep. His plan was as daring as it was brilliant. March his army across Gaul, traverse the Alps, and strike Italy from the north, a route never attempted before. It would be the boldest military maneuver of the ancient world. With an army of tens of thousands and a contingent of war elephants, Hannibal began the grueling journey. The Alps were a nightmare of snow, treacherous paths, and hostile tribes. Many soldiers perished. Elephants froze, supplies ran low. Yet Hannibal pressed forward, his eyes fixed on the plains of Italy. When he finally emerged, battered but intact, the Roman Republic was stunned. Hannibal wasted no time. In a series of masterful engagements, Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, he decimated Roman forces. At Cannae alone, nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers died in a single day, encircled and slaughtered by Hannibal's tactical genius. Rome had never faced such devastation, but despite these victories, Rome refused to surrender. The city, though shaken, held firm. Reinforcements were raised, new generals took command, and while Hannibal roamed the Italian countryside, he lacked the resources to besiege the city itself. Carthage, still cautious, failed to send sufficient reinforcements. The war dragged on. Over time, Rome adapted. They avoided direct battle and focused on attrition. They targeted Hannibal's supply lines, allies, and Iberian territories. Eventually, Roman forces, under the command of Scipio Africanus, took the fight to Hispania and later to North Africa itself. Hannibal was forced to return home to defend his people. At the Battle of Zama near Carthage, Hannibal faced Scipio in a final decisive confrontation. Despite his brilliance, Hannibal was defeated. Carthage surrendered. The Second Punic War was over, but its legacy was far from finished. The story of Hannibal Barca remains one of resilience, genius, and defiance against overwhelming odds. He may not have destroyed Rome, but he forever altered the course of history and became a symbol of what a determined mind can achieve, even against an empire. Now the question is, what do we take from this story? But like Hannibal, we must study, adapt, and strike when the time is right. Strategy, patience, and determination can turn underdogs into legends. So if you found this history powerful, if it made you think, feel, or question, don't let the story stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Join us as we uncover more hidden truths, untold stories, and real moments that shaped the world. Because history doesn't repeat, it teaches. And your journey into the past has only just begun.